Hello, my loves. Welcome back to the relationship rehab. Yes, we are back. It's been about a month. We took a small break, which was much needed. And in this episode, I want to just get real and roll with you and have a little bit of a heart to heart about what this season has been all about and why we took a small break. And now, as we come back, I really wanted to take this season of learning and growth to be able to speak on some of the lessons, some of the experiences that I've been having this summer. It has been an interesting summer, and I know that a lot of us have been feeling it this year. A lot of change, a lot of endings, a lot of beginnings. So, if this is something that you have been experiencing where there's just been this element of constant uncertainty this year, and God has been removing things and putting things in place and really just straightening you out and inviting you to evolve and shed and be witnessed in that as well, and to really be humble to your knees so you can listen, so you can surrender, so you can trust. This episode is going to really support you. And I was umming and ahhing whether to actually do this episode, first of all, because it's a very personal journey, but I want to be able to share what has been happening because I know a lot of us are going through it together. So here I am. I've done a couple of episodes previously about just what's been happening during the shedding season. And I have been finding myself in these cycles of burnout, and I have been going through a breakup this year as well. So it's a lot. And I had to really sit with myself and say, it's a lot. And not to be pushing through it all the time, but just to really take that space. But as a type A, ambitious Capricorn girly, I really struggle with stopping. I really struggle with resting and giving myself permission. I think that is probably the main thing that I've learned this summer is how productive it is to stop. And I know we hear it a lot. And I remember hearing it and being like, oh, okay, maybe for other people, but I'm just going to keep going because I got goals to achieve. I've got things to do and I've got a legacy to create. And I found myself on this hamster wheel of just constant going and going and crashing and burning and coming back to it. And it is probably the greatest gift I could have given myself. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I got to the space where I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live my life in such an inauthentic way. And I really was humbled to my knees and asked God to remove everything that needed to be removed. And I was asking, I was praying for more courage to surrender, to trust, to have faith, to walk in faith and not fear. And God's, all right, here you go. There's a bunch of challenges to do that. And I think when we resist the challenges and the lessons that are coming into our life, when we resist God removing things, whether it's a relationship, whether it's an opportunity, whether it's just the way that you've been living your life, it's not punishment. That's what I had to wrap my head around. It's not God punishing me. Trust me, I've had many a nights where I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Why am I feeling so uncertain? Why am I feeling like this relationship needs to end? Why am I feeling like I don't know what to do with my life anymore? Because I had a moment where I thought I was moving back to the UK. I've spoke openly about this, and I'm moving back to the UK, people, and I'm excited. And then I get here, and there's just this feeling that this is not my place. And that's really difficult because we have our will, we have what we want for our lives and what we want for ourselves. But when it doesn't align with the feelings that we receive from the divine, from the creator, from the universe, from God, whatever you call it, you will always feel that element of friction. And deep down, your intuition is speaking to you that this thing is not right for you and you need to step back. And one of the other major lessons that I have gone through and now I've come up to the other end is detachment. I started to notice how attached I was to my business, to the way that my life was, to my old limiting beliefs, even was starting to come up to the surface. And before I knew it, I was starting to live into these patterns again. And being in an old environment probably doesn't help, but I'm not going to start using that as an excuse. But it is in that moment where we have to give everything to God. We have to be like, okay, take it all if that's what's necessary. And I had a moment where I thought that I was closing down the business, that I was going to move back to the UK, find myself a job. But thankfully, that is not the case. Thankfully, I have been lucky enough to really take that space to find that clarity. And I know not everybody does have that luxury. And I'm just very thankful that I've built up a one-on-one coaching practice, that I have my clients, and I was able to just really pour into them, focus on them while focusing on myself, while learning new beliefs that life gets to be so good. Life gets to be filled with your desires and your wishes, but it does have to align with God. And you have to be able to be a vessel for receiving all of that. So if you're wanting all these things, whether it's the big business, the big secure relationship, the amazing lifestyle where you're traveling, etc., if you haven't expanded your capacity to receive that, what I mean by that is if you're still holding on to beliefs that you won't be able to get that because that's meant for someone else, or you're still holding blocks around love that it's not meant for you, or there's no one out there for you, or who are you to now start this business or to give up your job and go traveling. If we're still holding that programming, it's like God is trying to give us what we want, but we're just throwing it back in his face because we don't believe that we are worthy of receiving it, that we're not enough of receiving it. I notice this in myself a little bit. There's peaks and valleys. In any relationship, there's peaks and valleys. How can we hold ourselves through the valleys in order to get back up to the peaks? Trekking in Nepal really taught me that, where you have to go down the valley in order to get back up to the other peak. And even when you reach the top of that peak, that mountain, you think, oh, I've arrived. Oh, here I am. I've accomplished this and I've healed that. And then your guide goes, huh, I don't think so. We got to go back down this valley in order to get back up to that peak. And when we realize that this healing journey, when this human experience doesn't really have a destination, when we stop chasing the destination, when we stop trying to control the outcome, we can really start to enjoy the process. We can be present with the process. So this summer as a whole has been amazing. Absolutely amazing. I've had so much time with family. I've been able to really shift some old stories, beliefs, and paradigms within myself. And I'm so ready for this next chapter. And it is such a good feeling when you get there. And you do reach that space, that point when you allow yourself to surrender and you give everything to God. And in that moment, you become detached. You're like, I'm no longer attached to this thing, this business, this person, this lifestyle. And in that moment, God can rush in and you can start to really see what needs to go and what can stay, but you need to show up differently. And you're being invited to show up differently. And what does that look like? Are there wounds and beliefs that you need to pay attention to? Are there ways of being, habits that need to be deconstructed and reformed? When we want to evolve, when we want to achieve something that we've never had before, whether that's a business or secure relationship or a different life as a whole, different career, we need to change because we can't expect our external reality to influence us internally. It is the other way around. We need to shift ourselves internally in order to change the way that the external reality. And like I said, it really does come back to being able to receive, being able to feel so worthy of the things that you desire. Start looking at the narratives and the stories that you hold about this new, brand new thing that you want to bring into your life that does instill fear, uncertainty, anxiety in your body. And I always come back to the importance of nervous system regulation. And I know a lot of us are, we want to be able to figure things out. We want to be able to think our way out of something. We don't want to feel in the first place. But that is where the magic happens, is being able to create the space to feel, being able to expand your window of tolerance, being able to sit in the uncomfortable, because life is going to throw you curveballs. It just is. You're going to deal with stress. You're going to deal with anxiety. These are not things that we should be pushing away. These are things that are actually can be used for our greatest good. It can send us messages about what's going on inside, what is triggering us, and triggers in and of themselves are incredible opportunities to get to know ourselves a little bit more, to heal ourselves a little bit more. And that's the journey of this summer, where I was deep into my nervous system regulation, but it just didn't feel like I was fully present with it, because I had all this cognitive stress, all this cognitive dis-ease in my mind. And I just knew in that moment I had to take a pause. And taking a pause can be one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself, whether it's in work, whether it's a relationship. Let's normalize taking space. Let's normalize taking a break, because it doesn't have to mean that it's failing, because it's not. It means that you're running on empty, that there are fumes coming from the stress and anxiety and overwhelm, and we just need to press the pause button. We need to step back. We need to breathe. And I'm so thankful that I gave myself permission to do that, because now stepping back into it, I feel like a completely different person. And I used to think self-love was about taking care of yourself, loving on yourself, the cliche of just taking all the bubble baths, getting your nails done, giving yourself the attention that you might be craving from other people, when actually self-love is prioritizing yourself no matter what, no matter how much you want the relationship, the person, the business, the lifestyle. You come first. Your peace comes first. What needs to happen in order for you to get to that space? And the freedom that you feel when you start to prioritize your peace, when you start to prioritize your mental health, nothing else matters. And that's where the detachment element then comes in as well. No longer are you attached to what people think about you. No longer are you attached to the stories that you have made around being single, or going through a breakup, or taking a step back from your career. It doesn't matter anymore what people think. What matters is how you are being in that space. And you can come back into it, or God will close the door and will reopen another one where you can step into that space as an evolved human being, as a spirit. Because we are all here. I really do believe that we are here on this planet to have an experience, and our soul is meant to evolve. It is not meant to stay in one place. So you might be listening to this now and be really feeling the calling to evolve, and what that looks like and feels freaking uncomfortable. But how can you in that moment lean into trust, lean into faith, lean into surrender? I never thought that I would be here in this moment talking about all these things. Even though I have always had a relationship with God, I've never truly been in a space where I've been called to fully surrender myself. And it is the most freeing thing that I have ever experienced. In that moment, you realize that God is not punishing you, He is protecting you. And how can we give Him that control, to release the control from ourselves? Because obviously, this isn't working. And allow Him to remove, allow Him to bring. And you are just in a state of surrender and receiving. And this is what it means to be in your feminine, because the masculine is all about the doing and the achieving and the go-getting, which of course we need that side of us as well. But when does it get to the point where we are stepping into this hyper masculinity, which is where I found myself, where I just couldn't stop working because I love my work, absolutely love my work. I know that this is what I'm meant to be on this earth for, because when I was in that space where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go back to social work. I'm just going to go back to getting a job. And I romanticized it. Why? Because I wanted safety. I wanted familiarity, because the way that I was expanding in my business or being called to expand felt uncomfortable. And I wasn't quite there yet mentally. So instead, I dropped the ball. I was like, oh, and that's okay. If we need to drop the ball, we can always pick the ball back up. This is about your journey. This is not about getting everything right, getting everything perfect. We need to stop putting so much pressure on ourselves in this hustle culture, in this productive society. We have lost touch with ourselves. And the moment I realized that was when I made the decision to step back from the business. And I had this feeling, and I just want to cry when I think about it. I had this feeling of like an exhale, calm. That's what it means to regulate your nervous system, is to pull back sometimes from the things that are stretching your system a little bit too much. So you can work on expanding and bringing that thing back in. So if the relationship feels too much, if the work feels too much, can we give ourselves just a moment of grace to press that pause button and exhale? And the next thing I did was I put on my hiking boots, put on my coat, and I just got back into the mountains. And I live in the back and beyond of Wales. I live in the valleys of Wales. I live very close to a national park, the most beautiful national park. And I just spent time there and I just cried because it was so beautiful, and it felt like for the first time I was really seeing it. I wasn't in my mind thinking about my next social media reel. I really just poured all that energy and attention back into myself. And I think when you go through a breakup, when you go through something difficult and you're pushed into that space where you have to come back to yourself and nature, because that's where God is. He's in nature. So if you're struggling to listen to God, to hear God, go into nature. I promise you. Go into nature, get in touch with nature, feel the leaves, look at the flowers, listen to the water, get your shoes off and get your feet in the water, get your feet on the ground, and just be. Give yourself that permission. And I know it's easier said than done. And there will be people listening to this that really would want that, but just are not quite there yet. I just really encourage you to just give yourself a small insight into it. You don't have to get to the big burnout or the big breakup in order to be in a state of evolution. You don't have to go through pain in order to reach your power. That is there for you, within reach, when you just give yourself the permission to reach out for it. So a little note on the breakup, because I've made an episode about this, so I won't go into too much detail. You can find that on the podcast. But how I've evolved right now from it is, when it happened, I initiated it. It felt like the right decision. And I wouldn't say that I was glad to have gone through it, but I knew I had to go through it, even though it was super uncomfortable. And there were moments where I questioned my decision. And I got angry with God as to why he felt the need to remove this man from my life. And I knew why. I knew there were things that didn't quite add up. And I knew on the long term, it would not have worked out. But the old me would not have listened to that. And she would have kept in that relationship, knowing that eventually it would have reached a point where I would have felt unfulfilled and unsatisfied. But we do need to listen to those small voices, even though we want to fight them. And I come to a complete state of acceptance now of that, to the point where my ex and I we're really good friends. And I love that. Another thing that I would never have been able to have achieved if I didn't work on that element of knowing, detachment, acceptance, surrender. And it feels exciting to open up that space again to explore. Yes, I've given myself the time to heal, and I think that is so important. And I can see that the space is starting to be cleansed, starting to open up again. And I'm excited to what this new chapter is going to bring. And that really is the spiritual truth that I'm anchoring in right now. When I think about self love, it's such a spiritual experience to be able to be with yourself. And this doesn't mean not prioritizing anyone else, because I know that we can sometimes fall into roles of caregiving, nurturing, that they are superpowers that we hold, and that is such a beautiful part of us. And we don't want to get rid of that. We don't want to get rid of this beautiful, nurturing part of us, but we want to be able to have the discernment of when we are overpouring, overgiving, when we are sacrificing ourselves for other people's comfortability, for other people's needs and desires and boundaries. But how can we strengthen the relationship with ourselves so we can pour more into people? Oprah offered a metaphor where she mentioned that you have a cup and saucer, and a lot of us are pouring from the cup to others because we feel like if we have the energy, if we have the time, if we have the resources, then why not give it to others? And this again can come from conditioning. But what's inside the cup, the resources inside the cup are meant for us. That is ours. And when we are able to sustain the resources in the cup, what will happen is we'll start to overflow. Our cup will runneth over. And whatever is collected in the saucer, that is what we give to others. So, what I take from that is the more you pour into yourself, the more you see your value, your time, your energy as valuable, as sacred, the more precious you are with that, the more that people will respect you, the more that people will see that your energy, you're coming into relationships and environments with this powerful, vibrant energy because you have been precious and sacred with your resources. So, boundaries is always an ongoing lesson and is about catching ourselves when we are bending our boundaries. And it's not about having these strict castle gate boundaries, it's about knowing where I end and you begin. Those constant check-ins, do I have the capacity for this? And prioritizing your capacity rather than pushing yourself, sacrificing yourself for other people. And another thing I just want to mention about this summer before I bring this episode to a close is I had an experience that I have been waiting for quite some time. And it's something that I've really had to take the time to process, and I still am in a way. I had the opportunity to meet with one of my exes that I haven't seen or heard from in 6 years. It was such a big deal, and it was the most healing thing I think I could have ever gone through. I really want to offer some insights into this. I'm still processing it though, and I may or may not make another episode about this because if there was any time where I had that assurance and certainty that I am no longer in anxious attachment, it was this time, and it was such a beautiful realization of how much I've healed and grown and become secure within myself. And I really do want to share that with you guys. So let me know in the comments if this is something you do want to receive, and I will work towards putting it into something that I can share with you, obviously with respecting the other person involved, but it will just be my experience. I think there is just such a lot to share there because it was one of the most profound experiences I've had this year. So A lot has happened in the summer, and no doubt a lot has happened for you too. So, if you are in this season of rebuilding and feeling uncertain and shifting, I want to invite you, my love, if you can just lean into it. Notice if you are resisting anything that God is removing. Maybe you're going through heartbreak and you really want that person to come back into your life. How can you be in this space where you can know and accept that this is how it's meant to be? This person is not for you, and I know that is so painful. It is something that I realized as I met with this ex that I haven't seen in 6 years. I thought he was the one, and he wasn't. I didn't see it at the time. I thought it for so long. And I wouldn't change anything about my journey, but I wonder if you can tap into that energy, that spiritual energy, if you can tap into God and know that this is happening for your good, that everything happens for your own good, that everything happens for a reason. And sometimes we don't see it in the moment, but we can just be with ourselves in the pain, knowing that things are going to get better because they always do. Or maybe you're in a state of burnout and really being called to rest and be with yourself, knowing that is a state of evolution, knowing that is an invitation to come back to yourself, into self-love, to really learn, like I just had to, really learn what it means to be in a state of self-love. And it's quite funny because a few years ago, I used to call myself a self-love coach. I had no idea. Thinking back to it now, I had no idea what self-love really meant until I had to get to that space. And I know that this is all these parts are for my own good. Or maybe you're just feeling confused about where your life path is going. Maybe you're lacking purpose, lacking clarity. I was stuck in this space of trying to figure it out. But when we're trying to figure it out, we're living in the mind, and your answers are not in the mind. I promise you, they're not. They're not. We think they are. We think that logically we need to make decisions from the mind in order to be sensible. But I'm sorry, but I was not put on this earth to be sensible. Who gets to define what sensible means? I have never been one to follow the sensible path ever since I broke away from the traditional 9 to 5 lifestyle when I was 26. I've always wanted to challenge myself to come out of the statu quo, come out of the matrix. And you don't have to make massive shifts like I did, but maybe just start to challenge some of the rules from society, from your conditioning that are actually trapping you, that are actually closing your heart and creating distance between you and your soul, because your soul knows. You know what you need to be doing. Your soul, your heart is trying to speak to you. So get out of that trying to figure it out space. Get into nature. Give yourself the space and time. And I know that this can be unsettling. I know that you're probably saying, but I've got shit to do. I've got money to make. I've got kids to take care of. I'm not saying drop that. Of course not. We all have responsibilities to ourselves and to others, but how can we create space for ourselves as well, even if it's just a pocket of time, and we can become super intentional with that pocket of time. So I just wanted to let you know, from me to you, heart to heart, even though you may feel like you're failing, that you're behind, that you're alone, that no one else is going through this, trust me, you're not alone. And you're definitely not behind. If anything, it's a little bit like the metaphor of an arrow. You feel like you're being pulled back. You are being pulled back in order to launch forward. Got an arrow tattoo on my foot to remind me of that. It's so true. And I've felt it, and you've probably felt it in your life before. Think back to the times where you thought that the world was ending, that you were in a state of shit, what am I going to do? And you always found a way. You have resilience within you. Think about all the different ways that God has showed up for you before in the past. Who's to say that He's not going to do that again? He's with you. And you got this. You can trust yourself. You can trust your decisions. You can trust your process. This is your life. You get to decide. And sometimes that just starts with deciding how I want to be with my feelings. I do not want to push them away anymore. And that, my loves, is true power. That is true freedom. And that is the embodiment of what it means to be secure in yourself. So thank you for being here. I hope that this episode has served you well. I would love to know what your biggest takeaway was. What was something that really spoke to you? Drop it in the comments so I can see that. And if you do need some support, know that you can always come to me, always find me. Send me a DM on Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. Let's connect. Let's talk. I will be returning to Thailand in a couple of weeks, which is very exciting. And I'll always want to be taking you on the journey with me because we are walking this journey together. We are in it together. So until then, my loves, I will see you in the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode on the Relationship Rehab podcast. If you really enjoyed this episode, it would really mean a lot to me if you was to share this episode with a friend who really needs to hear what has been talked about today, and also to rate and review this podcast. Hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss any new episodes coming out. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know what your biggest takeaway was from this episode.